I think we have been looking forward to sit down with you. A press conference is different to this kind of opportunity.
Yes.
So Justice Jukwa is a Zimbabwean judge of the High Court since 2012. She was sworn in there by former President Robert Mugabe during the GNU, and she was sworn into this particular office as the chairperson of ZEC on the 31st of January 2018. How's it been going so far, 6 months in?
6 months in, it's going pretty much as I expected.
Yeah?
Yes.
And which is what?
Which is that it's a hot seat and that it will get hotter. We are 15 days and counting to D-Day. So I fully expect that the silly season is out in full force.
The silly season. Justice Jukwa, your thoughts on the elections as we now discuss this topic tonight. 0717 777 777 is the number for you to call us on. We are in the Chisipiti studio at Capi Talk 100.4 FM. So our Star FM listeners and our Nyami Nyami listeners, please use that number to call us later in the program after we get some issues out the way. Justice Jukwa, as I said, you are trending, right? Probably one of the most sought after interviews we have with you tonight, this side of the hemisphere. And I wanted to just say that there are a few issues that have been coming up on social media. We can never know how true these things are. So as icebreakers, can we get some of this out the way? The first thing. Let's do that. The first thing is, do you care about being liked?
I don't particularly care about being liked. I care about doing the right thing. I care about the oath of office that I took as a judge. I care about the oath of office that I took as chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. And I do understand that in discharging these two oaths, I may not be very well liked, but I will do what is required by the oaths that I took.
Now, in this, that's a very firm answer, Justice Jukwa, and why I ask this is it's evident that there was a huge and long history of mistrust of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission by the Zimbabwean electorate. Forget political parties, just the people of Zimbabwe. And this is what I want to ask you to speak to now. And hopefully by the end of this program, we'll understand the human side behind the chairperson, but also respect your office. The image of ZEC right now, as you've seen on social media, comment from the Zimbabwe Council of Churches. The growing perception of ZEC as lacking independence is creating despondency amongst the voters. This growing narrative has, in this age of social media, closed space for electoral disputes to be resolved in a rational and fair manner by acceptable dispute resolution mechanisms. This kind of comment, there are many that I could read, of course, as you're much aware of. What do you say to this? The image of ZEC and the credibility and the motivation of voters to participate in this election?
What I would like to say in order to address these concerns is this. Zimbabwe as a country, as you very well know, is in a transition. And this transition actually started in November of last year. The transition has actually opened up spaces that were previously closed to Zimbabweans. I understand that the people of Zimbabwe mistrust ZEC, and this is due to perhaps what has happened in the past, in the last decade. So what I understand is I don't take it personally when Zimbabweans actually say to me, we don't trust the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission because of what has happened in the past. Because what happened in the past didn't happen in a single day, you see. It was a process. And I have every confidence in the people of Zimbabwe that they will allow us as a process as well to win back their trust. It's not going to happen in a day. I understand that. It's a process.
And so social media continues. While you say this, and I can see the sincerity in what you say, that you want to follow the law, you want to do your job. But there is that issue of the sentiment you talked about. Zimbabweans are in this transition. Since November and prior to that, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of desperation. There's a lot of need for this election to go well. Not just for the candidates, but for the people of Zimbabwe. We want an election that the people of the entire international community will say, you know what, Zimbabwe, you finally did it. And I'm pretty sure you would want that on your legacy,
yes,
where nobody contests this outcome. So when we read and we hear you at some press conferences, it sounds as if, for some, that you come across as arrogant, saying, I'm doing my job. If you don't like it, contest it in the courts afterwards. What does that do to the voter and the spirit of the Zimbabwean?
What I would like to say is that as the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, it's inevitable that we must, as the starting point, be guided by the law. I've said it. You've accused me of hiding behind the law. You've accused me of using the law as a shield. But I have said that as an electoral management body, as a starting point, we must be guided by the law. Having said that, I did say that we're not averse to considering other reasonable criteria for building consensus per se. So firstly, we are guided by the law. So our starting point is always, what does the law say? And then after we look at what the law says, we say, well, what do the people want? And what I have said, and I will go on record again and say it, we have said there are 55 political parties which successfully fielded candidates at the nomination courts. And we've said to them, there's a committee which is set up in terms of our constitution after the proclamation of the election, which is a multi-party liaison committee. And the purpose of these committees, they sit at national level, provincial level, district level, is to sit down and say, well, what is the dispute in this area? And they talk about electoral disputes. So we've said, let's use the existing structures that we have to discuss disputes. Disputes might come from Ruveneko, they might come from a political party, they might come from community leaders, for instance, but we're supposed to sit down using those structures and say, what are the disputes? So, for instance, at national level, we know that there are disputes surrounding certain things such as ballot papers and some such. But we actually, these committees are actually used at ward level, and I was being told today that there's a certain province where the multi-party liaison committees are presiding over disputes to do with defacing of posters, for instance. So they will sit down and one political candidate will stand up and say, well, Ruveneko defaced my poster. And someone says, well, who saw her? And that's what they do at that level. So we have encouraged to say, look, even if we were to go outside the confines of the law, we must have an objective criteria for adopting whatever it is that you would like. And we would like you to build consensus around it instead of just having one particular view being the dominant view.
All right, this is interesting. And as I said, Zimbabwe, this is your platform to speak to Justice Chigumba about your election. Take charge, send your messages. We've got our viewers from Facebook and they're all over Dubai, South Africa, everywhere, and on WhatsApp, of course. Justice Chigumba, while you explain that, do you concede, however, that there are some events that have happened in the last couple of days that have made the integrity of ZEC be explicitly questioned, where looks like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or you're not speaking the same message? I speak specifically to the issue of the postal ballot at Ross Camp in Bulawayo. Now, a publication that is part of the stable I work for published an article, right, saying that your chief elections officer said there is no such thing as a postal vote happening in Bulawayo, and then later had to retract that and acknowledge that indeed there was a postal vote happening. You then on record said that the elections officer was not denying that there's a postal vote happening. He was denying that ZEC set up polling stations. Please clarify this for the layman, because this left a lot to be desired.
All right, I will clarify that.
Please.
I do not make any such concessions that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. What I will say is that we have a lot of irresponsible sensationalization of issues by the media in all spheres. What the acting chief elections officer said in response to a telephone inquiry as to whether or not did the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission dispatch a ballot box to Bulawayo for the purpose of the postal vote, and he said that is ridiculous and it's nonsense, because the postal vote doesn't actually require a ballot box. So he denied that we had dispatched a ballot box. He denied that we had dispatched our officers. And he tried to explain, to say, when one utilizes a postal vote, it is exactly what it says. It's a postal vote. So ZEC did not send a ballot box. ZEC is not conducting voting. Because I think the question put to him was, is there voting taking place in Bulawayo? We understand that early voting, he said, there's no such thing. That's ridiculous. What I then said was, well, the question put to him was, did we set up a polling station inside Ross Camp? And his answer naturally was, no, we didn't, because in actual fact we didn't. What was taking place as Ross Camp was the exercise of the postal vote. I would like to clarify and say, Ruveneko, what I concede and do understand is that on social media, certain officers inside that camp sent SOS messages saying, please come and rescue us. We are being forced to vote in front of our commanding officers.
Right.
Now, that I concede, that is an electoral malpractice. That is strictly not allowed and forbidden in terms of the Electoral Act. The postal vote must be exercised in secret. Now, the problem that I have with that is not the fact that I want people to be forced to vote in front of their commanding officers. The problem that I have is the complaints were made on social media. And, well, certain people went to attend to those distress signals. The problem that I have now is I have said those officers who were forced to exercise their vote in front of their commanding officers, please lodge a formal complaint with ZEC so that I can take it up.
So at this stage, nothing has been investigated?
I've not received a formal complaint. I have seen the reports on social media. I've seen the pictures on social media. But
So
I
is
must
social
have,
media for you, as the chairperson of ZEC, an informal method of evidence? Is this
it's
something
not an informal
you do not take
method
seriously?
of evidence, but in order for my commission to start an investigation, we must have a formal complaint to say, look, my name is Ruveneko. I was at Ross Camp. I was forced to exercise my postal vote in front of commanding officer such and such. You understand? Because investigations must involve questions of evidence, you see.
If it has been put on social media, let's assume informally or whichever the case, is this not a cry for help? Can ZEC not work backwards? Is this not important enough for you to dig into an investigation?
Veneko.
Because evidently, Mpurisaye arikutochka kwa ari koko. Is it not something that the Commission should take up and then take to the relevant authorities that deal with such discrepancies in the electoral process?
To be very honest with you, if I had to investigate all the allegations on social media on a daily basis, I wouldn't have time to procure election materials. We must have a formal complaint. And just to tell you, we had one of our commissioners who's actually based in Bulawayo, Commissioner Dr. Moyo, who actually chairs the multi-party liaison committees. He actually went to Ross Camp. He was actually present. He was there, and he talked to some of those officers.
And what did they say?
I'm not at liberty to say because I'm not Commissioner Dr. Moyo. But what he told me is he advised them to write to us formally and just tell us exactly what happened. Because quite obviously, when he got there and confronted command who was there, obviously the response that he got is no one was forced to vote in front of anyone. Now you see, as a commission, what you're then faced with is he says, she says. And the thing is, how do you investigate
Isn't
that?
there a desk, from my understanding, at the ZRP that deals with this during the selection process?
We have Assistant Commissioner Kudzayi. He superintends the officers who deal with elections.
So while you procure ballot papers, can he deal with that?
Senior Assistant Commissioner Kudzayi is actually seized with the matter.
All right.
And I'm actually in contact with him. And I've said to him, Senior Assistant Commissioner, please investigate. Because the only issue that we have said might be an electoral malpractice is the question of whether or not officers were forced to vote in front of their commanding officers. Because the postal vote is supposed to be exercised in secret. So what it is we do dispatch it through their commanding officers, which is what the law says, but they're supposed to go into a little corner and exercise their right to vote,
Sure.
and then put it in an envelope, and then put it in the box that is then dispatched. But if they were told, sit down by a commanding officer, let me see where you're putting your X, that's wrong.
It's out of order, if that is what has happened.
If that is what happened, but my
Justice
problem
Jukwa,
is
yes.
establishing what actually transpired.
Now, I want to come to this issue of election rigging, you know, where the reputation of ZEC has been tainted in the past for whatever reason. Going forward, however, I've sat with different members of Parliament and different presidential aspirants who speak to this process of irregularities in elections. One of the things that is talked of is intimidation. Voter intimidation, where perhaps there might not be magical ballot papers and extra papers that are slipped into a box, but one way that has been said to have been a method of any party stealing an election is that intimidation. So how is ZEC going to equip itself to handle this if at this stage, with such small numbers of a ZRP postal vote, is struggling to deal with it and hammer it down? What then when there's 5.4 million, 5.6 million, and then the rural constituents who are the biggest victims of such intimidation? How will you manage it if you are proving to not be managing this now with as much urgency? And then there's so much miscommunication within the Commission.
Thank you for asking me that question, Ruveneko, because it gives me a chance to actually clarify. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission does not have an investigative mandate whatsoever, no matter what the electoral malpractice is. So, the Zimbabwe Republic Police has an investigative mandate. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission has an investigative mandate. So what we do is, when we get reports, or if complaints are referred to us to say, I was forced to exercise my right to the secret vote in front of my commanding office, we by necessity must refer those complaints to those constitutional bodies that have investigative powers.
Sure.
We don't have investigative powers. So traditionally,
Understood.
even when we had, if you recall previously, we used to have complaints around the issue of the voter slip, the one that you got when you registered to vote. We traditionally just refer those complaints to those bodies that can investigate matters. So this is why I'm saying, firstly, we must have a complaint, a formal complaint, which we then refer to Zimbabwe Republic Police and say, please investigate and come back to us and advise us what is happening.
Now, in your purview and what you can handle is the issues within the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Now, there's this issue you've clarified about the postal vote, where we as the public assumed that there was miscommunication, where our chief elections officer said one thing and then there was clarity and then there was confirmation and then he didn't mean that, then he meant that. So you've clarified it for us tonight. However, the other issue of public denying things and confusing us as the public is that issue of the photograph of you wearing a scarf, this scarf which is attached to the current president in terms of his swag, so to speak, and that therefore attached to the party Zanu-PF. Now, seeing you in the scarf made people think that you are captured by Zanu-PF. This chief elections officer, same one in question, said this is absolute hogwash and that this is a Photoshop job. He then had to take back these words again after being, and he said this publicly. He had to take back these words again publicly. Again, almost make it seem like he lied. And this is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, a commission we're supposed to have the utmost faith in, where what you say is what you say and your word is golden. That's in your purview, Commissioner. If you could address that and how you've dealt with your subsequent chief elections officer for such utterances.
Well, what I will say is, firstly, let me just clarify. The scarf, which is now associated with a particular political candidate, that scarf was designed by a brilliant young Zimbabwean girl who then approached a group of us when I was a High Court judge to say, look, I've designed a scarf in an effort to build national consciousness. She didn't only design the scarf, she designed a couple of caps that said Team Zimbabwe. She designed a cloth. She was trying to revive national consciousness and pride in our country. And she actually gave me that scarf as a present at that venue where she was addressing us to say, look, I've designed a national dress, I've designed a national cloth, I want to build national consciousness. Do you as women judges, do you as a woman judge, do you want to support me? And I did want to support her, and I was very grateful for the present that she gave me, and I took a picture. Now, the
Justice Chigumba, that's like the referee last night having worn a Croatian jersey, being a ref of the game.
This is before I became the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. I was a High Court judge, yes, but I was not ZEC chair when that picture was taken.
When was that picture taken?
If you say when exactly, I know in between times between being ZEC chair and being a High Court judge, that's when I met with the designer of the scarf.
So this was last year, because you were given this office 31st of January 2018.
It was before I became ZEC chair.
So this was 2017.
It was before I became ZEC chair.
I'm just clarifying.
You're trying to pin me down to a specific date, and I can't really recall the date.
We just want to make sure the story adds up.
I was a High Court judge,
right,
but I was not yet ZEC chair.
All right.
So we took a picture. We took a picture. Now, with regards to what I think about the statements made on my behalf by members of my staff, they obviously, when they saw the picture, they couldn't believe it, because they know very well how I'm always very careful around issues of perception. So in their view, they obviously thought it's obviously a Photoshop, because our chairperson would never do that. And so
that's your defense of his comment?
Yes, that's my defense of his comment. He obviously thought in his mind that it must be a Photoshop, because he knew that I would never jeopardize the image of the Commission.
Interesting response there from Justice Chigumba as we clarify and get the elephants out the room and clear up some of these stories we've been seeing, the memes that go around, the comments on WhatsApp groups, trying to get it clear where her position is, where she stands, how she sees our election, and what she stands for. One of the other issues, while we clarify, is this issue of your personal life, Justice Chigumba. A comment was made, lots of tweets actually, but it started quite a hot conversation on Twitter. A former Sunday Mail editor in particular, I'll cite him as one of the examples, where he tweeted, Justice Chigumba must resign from her position as ZEC. While her privacy must ordinarily be respected, there is a strong public interest argument in this instance where a private sexual relationship fetters the discretion of a judge. I will publish the full story on Wednesday. Let's talk about this. It has come to the public's attention again on social media that you are allegedly in a relationship that might compromise your position and independence as the chairperson of ZEC.
What I want to categorically state is, firstly, my private life is my private life, and it should remain exactly that, private. I will answer your question directly. I am not in any sexual relationship or any relationship whatsoever which has the potential or is likely to jeopardize my ability to discharge my functions. To answer you very expressly, I am not in a sexual relationship with a presidential candidate.
There you hear Justice Chigumba clarifying all those allegations. Now if we can get into other business pertaining to the 2018 elections, your questions, your comments are very welcome tonight on our platform. We are live from Capital 100.4 FM. We are also live on Star FM and live on Nyami Nyami FM. So do get your comments and thoughts. In a few minutes, we'll open up the phone lines for you to get a few questions in to Justice Chigumba. I don't even think we would have enough time to address everything. But one thing we must look at, Justice Chigumba, is the recent current affairs that have happened since last week, that pertaining to a protest by the opposition party, the MDC Alliance. What are your thoughts on that demonstration? The way that they came to the offices, your absence at your office when they arrived. What was the process, and what did you make of their approach to address these issues with you?
All right. The first thing that I want to say is that I am the very first person to stand up in a room full of people who are asked to stand up if they believe in the right to freedom of association and the right to freedom of assembly. I believe in the constitutional right to exercise one's a right to demonstrate. Having said that, the second thing that I want to say is that no right, whether it's in terms of the Constitution or in terms of any enabling legislation, is absolute. Every right must have limitations. And I believe that in exercising one's right to demonstrate or associate with one's peers, one must be cognizant of not trampling on other people's rights. Mm-hmm. That's the second thing.
Right.
The third thing that I want to say is that the manner in which my name and my person was vilified in that demonstration is regrettable, most particularly by a political party that's actually headed by lawyers who are officers of the court, who are supposed to not mislead the electorate with regards to legal provisions, and who are supposed to have utmost respect for judicial officers at all times. We can differ in our opinions, Ruveneko, without necessarily calling each other names. And the last thing that I want to say is I'm greatly concerned by this gap, or this, I don't know what to call it, in our society, whereby when our male counterparts don't agree with our opinions as women, they cast aspersions on our morals simply because we have different opinions. They don't call themselves such names. They, as males, don't cast aspersions on their own morals simply because they don't agree. They go and watch soccer together and talk about their differences. Why is it that when our male counterparts have differences with us, aspersions are cast on our morals and our characters? I think this is regrettable, and I would like to remind all political parties that they signed a peace pledge, and that they're actually bound by the code of conduct of political parties, which says that they must not indulge in hate speech.
This is interesting that we talk about gender here. I mean, and there's so many instances where we try to avoid the issue of gender, especially as a strong woman. You probably say, I'm in this office out of merit. And there are times where your gender will always come to the table. The H word, I believe, was used during this process which you speak of.
Oh yes, repeatedly.
Right. Now, taking away from, not to take away from the personal attacks on you, let's look at what they are actually pushing for, and if they are going to achieve what they hope to achieve. The president of the alliance has on record repeatedly said, if there are no reforms, or if there will be no elections, and you are on record also saying that only an earthquake can stop this election. Now, the spokesperson of President Chamisa, Dr. Siwanda, sat in that chair next to you a few weeks ago and said categorically that Justice Chigumba is inciting violence by saying that an earthquake is the only thing that can stop this election. I'd like to ask you, not necessarily to harp on about that, but to talk about the requirements and the demands of the opposition, of the MDC alliance through this march and continued even today, that they want to see certain things come to light. Where do you stand with that, and how do you respond?
Just to give a little bit of perspective on the earthquake metaphor. There was a judgment by the Chief Justice in which he explained the law and guided us to say, once the president proclaims the election date, there is nothing that can stop the election from taking place on the day that he will have proclaimed, purely because after proclamation, all the timelines up to the election actually run in terms of the Constitution.
Right.
He actually said it's incompetent for any court to try and stop the election because the election runs in terms of the Constitution. Now, I used a metaphor to try and explain my interpretation of that judgment to say the Chief Justice has spoken. He has said that nothing can stop an election after proclamation. In other words, if you listen carefully to that, I actually said, in other words, only an earthquake can stop elections. Those were my words, but I was paraphrasing a judgment of the highest court of the land. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is the MDC alliance in particular did previously march on the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and hand over a petition or a list of demands. We took the time and the trouble, and I must say we did bend over backwards and responded to that petition, which was quite lengthy, within a period of 5 days. And we stated our position as a commission to say this is what we thought about those demands. Now, to address specifically the demands made on the last petition, we did not receive notification that a petition would be handed to us.
You did not?
No, not on the second march. On the first march, we received notification.
But you knew there was a march?
Yes, we knew there was a march.
But you didn't know what they were coming to do?
Well, no. And when I did get word that there was a petition which was due to be handed over, I then instructed whoever was there, ZEC, to say, please represent us and receive the petition.
They didn't write to you to say we want to see you in particular, Justice Chigumba?
They wrote to us to say we are going to demonstrate because you have failed to implement the demands that we made in our first petition.
Right.
Which was fine with me. They had a right to demonstrate.
Okay. And not that you had to be there, but you just chose not to be present.
Well, I chose not to be present, especially when the H word was being repeatedly said.
I see. All right, let's come to more of these demands, that of the ballot printing process. There's some now discrepancies again in the story. You want to understand from you, Justice Chigumba, if there was a voting process already underway and you say the ballot papers are still being printed, what is the actual truth? How did this happen, and why is the ballot printing process not being made transparent and open to everybody?
Let me just explain the ballot printing process. You do realize that this is a harmonized election, which means we have the presidential, we have the National Assembly, and we have council elections. That's why it's called harmonized. Mm-hmm. So in terms of printing, we have 3 lots of ballot paper printings. We had the printing of the presidential ballot, we had the printing of National Assembly ballot, which was being done at Fidelity, and then council ballots were being printed at Printflow. Now,
you mentioned the 2 locations. Where was the presidential ballot being printed?
Fidelity.
Fidelity. So presidential
and National Assembly at Fidelity. Printflow for
councillors. Right.
Right. Now, after those ballot papers are actually printed, remember we actually have to print voters' rolls. Mm-hmm. These voters' rolls are the voters' rolls which actually have pictures. And then they have your ID numbers, and then they have all that other information. So it's not only ballot papers that require printing, it's actually also voters' rolls, which is why we had a 30-day printing schedule.
Right.
And it's not only for ballot paper, it's also for voters' rolls. So currently we're actually printing voters' rolls.
So the ballot papers are done and printed?
Ballot papers are
finished.
Done for presidential and National Assembly, but council ballot papers are still being printed.
So when you say this, mademands aya kuhunzwa ne MDC alliance kuti ballot paper yenyu haisikumeka sense in terms of the Constitution. I'll read a tweet from David Coulthard. He says the presidential ballot violates Section 57 of the Electoral Act because Form V10 does not allow a double page. It has to be on a single page, as the South Africans did in 2014. Here is the SA ballot, the illegal Zim ballot, a Section 57 and Form V10. He tags a couple of people in this tweet. What do you say to this?
What does double page mean? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Perhaps
what you're
double
saying.
Columns?
All right.
Let's address this issue. I think you know what the issue is, right? The columns.
Let me tell you what we did as a commission. We had 3 different ballot paper designs. We actually have a ballot paper design department which sits down and designs the most cost-effective ballot paper. I will be the first to admit that we did not anticipate that we would have 23 presidential candidates in particular. But what we did is, firstly, we are guided by the law, which says that in the design and printing of ballot paper, the names of the candidates must be in alphabetical order. So that one is given. It's the law. So in coming up with our design, we then said we will do or go with 14 name columns. So you will find when you actually do go on polling day, 14 name columns, even for the National Assembly and even for council. So in any ward or constituency where there's more than 14 candidates, whether it's presidential, whether it's National Assembly, whether it's council, we decided to work with 14 numbered columns.
How do we know when you decided to do this? Because this is where the issue is. Because some will say that you chose and made this decision to favor the incumbent.
Why would we do that?
That's the question everybody asks. Why would you do that?
We are a commission that took an oath of office to discharge our duties without fear, favor, or prejudice. We are also not under the direction or control of anyone. And what the law actually says is that we are accountable to Parliament. But we are accountable to Parliament at the end of the process. So what happens is that at the end of polling, we do submit a report to Parliament which says this is the criteria that we used in coming up with ballot paper design. And that report is actually tabled before Parliament, and Parliament can actually summon us and question us. Now, when we say we are not under the direction or control of anyone, Ruvenia, I just want to give you an example. We did say 55 political parties successfully fielded candidates. Now, if we put all 55 political parties in this room and we said, come up with ballot paper design, what do you think would happen? When Parliament gave us the exclusive mandate to procure ballot paper, to design it, to print it and distribute it, Parliament knew exactly what it was doing, which is where we come back to the point of, are we being necessarily narrow in our interpretation of the law? Because what we do is we say, Parliament says we alone, only the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has the exclusive mandate to procure the paper, design it, print it and distribute it. Then we did say, let us do an exercise where we try and build consensus in recognition of the fact of what has happened in the past. Let's put all political parties in one room and have them witness the printing. So let's start with printing. Let's have them witness printing. At that printing, I personally actually was not there, but my commissioners were there and I received reports. All the parties that were present there actually received a copy of the ballot paper. They were actually given a copy of the ballot paper. I saw this,
you wrote this on record, that
they were shown the ballot paper, they were shown the security features, the watermarks, and they were actually told, take this ballot paper, put your X on it, and if after 12 hours the X migrates, bring the ballot paper back to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission.
Okay, well,
they're not talking about that.
They're addressing that, right, in the essence of saying the custody of the ballot papers. Where are they now and who's securing them?
Ballot paper is at Fidelity Printers. Fidelity Printers is an underground bunker. They've secured the ballot paper. They will transport it as well to our provincial centers for distribution to polling stations.
Right.
It's only ever one company. The law then says after the printing is done, we must account to Zimbabweans and publish in a newspaper how much ballot paper did we buy, how much did we print, how much is surplus, and the surplus is not allowed to be more than 10% of registered voters, and that's actually law. But we must publish that when we finish printing. We're still printing voters' rolls. When we finish, we will publish.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Justice Chigumba. The paper that you use for the presidential ballot, right? The presidential list, the candidates. Is it true or not true that this comes as a roll? That you can cut it into whatever dimensions you so see fit? So if you allowed for political parties to assess this design that you had come up with, the one with 14 on one side and then 9 on the other side, why didn't you consider that contestation and then just make one long strip? I've seen papers of candidates all over the world, different shapes, forms, sizes. You could have made it 1 meter long if you wanted to, because in essence you're just cutting to suit roll. All you're doing is you're cutting it to suit what you design. Why didn't you just keep the piece and make it a one long piece of paper.
So just to be clear, political parties were not shown the design of the presidential ballot paper. They were shown the actual blank ballot paper to say this is the quality and the type of ballot paper, and these are the security features on the ballot paper. And they were encouraged to take it away, put an X on it, because remember their concerns were the ballot paper that has been procured by us, if you put an X on it, the X can migrate to go to a different section.
I think you've clarified that one.
Yes. So ordinarily, yes, we do procure ballot paper rolls, and this is what we had initially procured. But we actually had to do a fresh round of procurements. When we had that large number of presidential candidates, we actually then had to procure ballot paper sheets. Now, the sheets that we actually procured, if we had used the single column design, we would have had to procure double the amount of ballot paper that we had procured, and everybody knows this.
Not really. You would have cut it in half.
No.
And made a long strip, no?
No, that was not the advice that we received from our designers. Remember,
but you could also advise your designers. Usually they're under your instruction, are they not?
We did inquire from them whether this was possible. If their advice was, if we take a single sheet, an A3 size or slightly longer, it would have to be folded after the
voting is done and put into a ballot box.
And put into a ballot box. And they advised that it would be too thick to go into the aperture of the ballot box, which means we'd have had to do fresh procurement of ballot boxes that would have had to go with that single column.
And you had already procured ballot boxes?
Well, we didn't.
Not really.
We didn't do fresh procurements of ballot boxes in 2018. We were using the ballot boxes that we procured in 2013. As you know, Ruveneko, the state of our economy, our country doesn't have a lot of money to throw around.
I see. So we're recycling the ballot boxes.
We recycled the ballot boxes.
So the ballot paper was designed to suit the current design of the ballot box, practically speaking.
If we'd used single column, we would have had to procure fresh ballot boxes and also pay double the amount of money. And as you know, I have been saying, we submitted a budget of 198 million and Treasury could only commit to 148 because of the state of our economy.
I want to come to our viewers and our listeners. Facebook viewers are literally all over the world. There's lots of comments coming in from you. Thank you for tuning in. Someone here saying, who is this novice designer? That's Leon Donald there. Look, there's lots of comments on this ballot paper, but it's unfortunate Zimbabwe, that from this interview, we can deduct that ballot paper, the presidential one in particular, is not going to change. Is it going to change? Is there an opportunity that it might?
Water under the bridge.
It's water under the bridge. So Zimbabwe, you've heard it from Justice Chigumba, no matter what we might say about it or how we feel or what we think should be designed or not designed, it has been printed, and that's the one we're going to vote with on July 30. Let me take some callers now. Justice Chigumba, if you'll allow us a few phone calls before the end of our program. You're listening to Capitalk 100.4 FM. I'm Ruveneko, in studio with the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, Justice Priscilla Chigumba, and we are live on Star FM as well as Nyami Nyami FM. Let's take our first caller tonight. Good evening, you're live on Capitalk, Star FM and Diamond FM.
Hello, hi, I'm right.
Hi, good evening. Who's calling?
It's good, Brian.
Brian, please go ahead.
Okay. I think pani a bit of a challenge. Judge, Marubu thought I'm slipping in fact, but I wonder, but I just want to pick one or two things. Do pick a chip syrup pani design a ballot, which is one of the issues. It is Zaga present, I believe, in the last issue that the demonstration was about. And then now she's saying good, the issue is already water under the bridge, of which it's a contentious issue as it stands. What if more in language, we're still to engage the guys who are going to demonstrate about this, and then we'll give you a final decision. Just to give us a bit of hope these people are willing to engage us. Because when you say it's water under the bridge, it's more like a stamping and saying, it can't be changed because since I'm the head of ZEC, my decision cannot be changed or something like that. Because if we're talking about a budget, why not go to the people? Because I believe if there is a problem with the election, it can cause even more costs in terms of the instability because people have not agreed on this election. So that can be even more costly than just to properly do this thing. And if it means we extend a budget or whatever, as long as now, because we say up in the election about Fara. And then the other issue, and I should part of Gunzanzi, my ballot saying greenery, voters row, I don't know, councillorship. is still being printed. But then the police have already voted. So which material were they using when they did that voting? Because funny issue which is I don't know if you got me there.
No, understood. Thank you for that. Thank you for your call, Brian. Justice Jukwa, if you could answer that. There's a number of questions you asked there, and I think an interesting one is that to say Mapurisa akavota and those doing the postal ballot, you said that the councillors were not yet, those ballot papers were not finished being printed. What did they use then?
I would like to thank the caller for that question because it gives me an opportunity to clarify that. When we do our printing, we actually do it province by province. So when I say ballot paper, we finished printing this and we haven't finished printing that, we print province by province. So you will actually find Roskemp was Blaauwai province. We had finished all the printing in Blaauwai province. And when we print Blaauwai province, it means that presidential, National Assembly and Council for Blaauwai province will have been completed. And that's why we will have sent the postal vote to Blaauwai, because as a province, we will have finished that. If you... I
this
know
is interesting
on social media, I know in Mash Central, I think yesterday or a couple of days, we also had issues with ballot paper because we had finished printing for Mash Central as a province and actually sent the postal vote to Mash Central. So we print per province. Per province.
What of the diplomats? Because I know there was the postal vote there. I believe in total about 7,461 applied for the postal vote and are using it. So what then do you do for all those diplomats across the globe?
We actually had a lot of problems with the question of availing the ballots for the diplomats, and I must admit it posed challenges for us because this is our first polling station specific election. In previous elections we were not polling station specific, so I will be the first to admit that there were challenges with regards to diplomats and that we did our best in the circumstances.
As you can hear, Justice Chigumba is trying to answer all of our burning questions tonight, Zimbabwe. We have a few more minutes left with her. I implore you to send all your questions so that we can understand. Justice Chigumba, on that issue of being liked in the beginning, when you made that comment of it's water under the bridge in regards to the presidential ballot paper, this is the feedback and this is the social media vitriol that you receive for comments such as that. And the caller even said it, that could you not use different language that makes you just sound more human and understanding the gripes and the concerns of the electorate, that it doesn't sound nice to be told that if that's their concern. I don't know how you address that.
I will tell you what the difficulty is. The difficulty is I must balance being nice, being liked, and simply just telling the truth. Now, the danger in misleading people to say something can be done about the design, something can be done about observing printing, is that I will be accused of being dishonest. And in a way, it's dishonest. What I am saying, let's just put a little bit of perspective. This is 15 days before the election. Is it honest to mislead Zimbabweans to say 15 days before the day of the election we have not yet printed ballot paper, or that we are likely to abandon the ballot paper that we have printed and start afresh? We simply don't have the time. I did talk about printing schedules. That's why when I say it's water under the bridge, it's not an attempt to be arrogant. It's an attempt to communicate the fact that it's done. But what we can discuss and talk about, look, the design, the printing is done. But there's still other issues on that list of demands, which are to do with distribution.
Yes, but before we move from that, Justice Chigumba, can I just exhaust this point?
No, can I answer?
Yeah.
The issues about distribution, these are the issues that can be discussed. But the issues that are done, they're done, and I will not mislead the public in an attempt to be liked. I can't do that.
How much did it cost to print the presidential ballot papers?
In particular, I haven't broken down the figures. I can have them with you.
Do we have an estimate, perhaps?
By tomorrow, I know not off the top of my head what our budget was for printing.
Yes.
I don't have the figures off the top of my head.
All right. I'm coming to this because while you say there's no time, energy, resources, and all of that, my question is, after the election, if people contest issues such as this, it'll be more time consuming, more resource constraining, and more expensive to redo a process that people contest as illegitimate based on those kinds of irregularities.
Actually, I concede that. But in defense of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, we did go out of our way We invited parties to view the printing, and there was a lot of conflict and dispute around that. But concessions were made, or attempts to build consensus were made in our defense. And I would like to say that those concessions that we made were actually outside the confines of the law, and that out of those 55 political parties that are going to Parliament, a couple of them actually registered displeasure at us going outside the confines of the law. So it's a question of balancing competing interests.
All right, let's talk about the distribution, like you said, other issues that we can address. The opposition has also on record said that there's involvement of military in regards of distribution. Is this true, and how do you clarify this?
I can talk about 2018 harmonized elections. The military will not be involved in the distribution of ballot paper. I have said we've engaged a printer, Fidelity Printers. Fidelity Printers, we've also engaged them to transport our ballot papers and electoral materials to the provinces. So the military will not be involved.
All right.
However, I just want to clarify something. The police, traditionally, we engage them to escort the vehicles that transport the ballot paper. We don't transport in police vehicles, but police do provide an escort.
The police,
Not
the military.
The Zimbabwe Republic.
Right. And then let's talk about the voters' roll, the discrepancies that have been seen so far. Just in the last seconds before Owen comes and takes the microphone from us, there's the issue of the 250,000 apparently duplications of the voters' roll, understanding that it is a human, while technical process of the BVR, it is also a human process. And this, when you say 250,000 over 5.6 million, some would say not too bad. Some are saying that's absolutely unacceptable. In terms of the trust and again that issue and that fear of rigging or kubirwa or anomalies in the outcome of the elections, what do you say to this one?
There are absolutely no ghost voters on that voters roll. I challenge anyone who finds ghost voters on the voters roll to bring me that ghost voter so that I can deal with it. What media houses have been doing in order to, I think, sell newspapers is misleading the public. I have gone on record to say we have 92,000 registered voters who have been placed on an exclusion list for various reasons. You will find that these 250,000 alleged ghosts, these 400 alleged people at one address and subs, a lot of these people are on the exclusion list. And what an exclusion list is, it's a list of voters who were initially registered but who have been excluded from the voters roll by us because of certain anomalies. Sure. And I want to categorically state there are no ghost voters. Absolutely not.
Okay, and Nyaima phone number. Van Wagapi wananima phone number.
My phone number, Ruveneko, Isusu says Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. It's not in our interest to give out our database to anybody, because it exposes us as a commission to being sued. In fact, Ruveneko, to be honest with you, my name is on that voters roll. The names of my children are on that voters roll. I'll be even exposing myself personally if I allowed such a thing to happen. Those people who were utilizing that data, firstly, some of them have come out to say they did not get the data from us. Secondly, some of the people who were receiving those messages are actually not on the voters roll. So we are investigating what happened, but the people who are responsible for that have come out on record and said they did not get that data from us. And I want to assure
Who are the people responsible for that?
Well, I know for one political party, Zanu-PF, came out in a statement and said they did not get the data from us.
Who did they say they got it from?
They did not say. I simply saw a statement. But we as the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission are investigating together with the Minister of ICT to say what happened.
And what of the voters roll that was published that has people's private information, the one that's available on the internet? That is a cyber security breach on every level.
It's a cyber security breach. They actually cloned our site, and we're in the process of doing something about it. And we should have that site taken down during the course of the next.
It's not yet down.
As of 12 midday today, it wasn't yet down.
What's so hard about that?
It's work in progress. It's the host is a UK based, so it's not actually in Zimbabwe. So we can't use any of our local laws to bring it down. So we are trying our best.
All right, Justice Chigumba, any parting words for the people of Zimbabwe as we prepare for July 30? We have hopefully exhausted some of the pressing issues, never all of them. Zimbabwe, understand that in the time we had, we tried to highlight the key ones that you've raised on Twitter, on Facebook, on WhatsApp, all over. But Justice Chigumba, I will give you a few seconds as a parting shot.
My parting shot is Zimbabweans, 30 July please come out in your numbers and choose the leaders of your choice. And I would like to respectfully urge all political parties, all stakeholders, all players, let us tolerate each other's divergent views and let us not use hate speech. Thank you, Ruveneko.
Thank you very much. Justice Priscilla Chigumba, Chairperson of ZEC, thank you for joining us tonight. It has been a pleasure hosting you, and I'm now handing over for a very late news bulletin from Owen. It is 8 p.m. here on Capitalk 100.4 FM, on Star FM Zimbabwe, and on Nyami Nyami FM. I'm Ruveneko. Good night for now. Be good. If you can't be good, be safe.
Good evening. Top story this hour. ZEC Chairperson Justice Priscilla Chigumba has said that if any police officers were forced to vote in front of their command